Welcome to the EU Canada Jobs podcast. Thank you for joining us as we explore the latest happenings in the European cannabis industry with people from the industry. I'm your host, Andy Mannsfeld from EU Canada Jobs. We connect European cannabis companies with people looking for employment in the industry, whether they're new to the industry or industry veterans. Today, we're lucky to have Stefan Ciecierski with us again. He's been with us before. He's been in the cannabis industry for a few years now, and he's been in the recruitment industry for several decades. So today we're going to be taking a look at what happened a little bit in 2024 and what we're thinking will happen in 2025. Thanks for joining us, Stefan.
Great. Well, great to be here. Thanks, Sandy. So as we're just starting the new year, we're still in January. I guess my first question to you is, how do you reflect on 2024?
I think it was a transformational kind of year almost. The medical cannabis industry has been in Europe for a while now, around 2017 for Germany and many other countries around the same time, but it was a very slow climb. And now in the last few years, you've seen a lot of growth, but especially in Germany, you saw, the legalization and with home grow. You saw cannabis clubs coming in, but also in a lot of other countries, you saw movement happening. Some places kind of unexpected, like Spain. Other places not so unexpected, like Czech Republic. So I think it's been a positive in general trend across Europe with medical cannabis being pushed further, recreational being a big topic, and in general, the whole continent is moving in a positive direction for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, talking about Germany, there is it true that what happens in Germany in some way probably happens in the rest of Europe?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I think that's general, not just for generally true, not just for the cannabis industry, but for kind of everything, for better or for worse. It is the biggest economic country in Europe. Also, population-wise, it's the biggest country, and therefore it holds a lot of power in Europe. Certainly with the cannabis industry, you are seeing that, as Germany's been growing, other countries are also moving forward. Czech Republic has been kind of mirroring what Germany does, sometimes trying to get a step ahead of Germany, sometimes a step behind. But other countries also are getting kind of pushed along. And I don't think it's even so much due to really the German politics of it. I think it's the people in Germany, the population, that is pushing this along. And that's happening in other countries too, not because of their following Germany, but just in general across Europe. I think you see people wanting this to happen, and they're pushing their politicians to do it. And I think Germany just has been kind of at the forefront of it for whatever reasons. And other countries, you're seeing the same thing, where people are pushing their politicians to really move forward with this.
So is it fair to say, therefore, that whatever the politics and the cannabis headlines are full of political stories,
Yeah.
but is it fair to say that whatever happens with the politics, the desire of the populations to have a more liberal use of cannabis is going to drive the markets? It's just a question of timing and how many obstructions get in the way.
I think so. I think that's what we've been seeing around the world. Take the U.S. The U.S. is still, for many years, was very anti-cannabis. It still is federally, yet the states have been pushing it forward because of those local people in those states saying, we want this, then the local politicians say yes. Or look at Spain. Spain has been very anti-cannabis from a federal point of view for a long time. But Barcelona has been having the cannabis clubs, and they've really been pushing it, and that's slowly pushing the country in that direction also. Look at many other countries. France, the government is very anti-cannabis, yet the patients are demanding that they have access, and it keeps working. So I think it is that I think that's the case. The people are pushing it and making it happen, even though politicians don't necessarily want to, which doesn't make sense to me. If so many, if a majority of your population wants it, what is the advantage for a politician to be against it? I don't know, but I'm not a politician. I don't know how that works, but it does seem like the people are pushing it regardless of what the governments want.
And just going back to the German example, what is it specifically that other countries can learn from the German experience, do you think?
I think there's a few things. I mean, I think first of all, the way that Germany has gone about it and the reasons behind it are very important. Germany has during this legalization process been saying they want to get rid of the black market, protect children, and protect actually the consumers or users of cannabis, whether it's for recreational or medical purposes. The point is that people are using it, and it's better for them to have a safe product. And children, of course, should not be consuming it. And the black market doesn't care if you're 15 or 50. They're going to sell it to you because it's illegal. They're going to jail or getting a fine or whatever either way. So they really don't care who's buying it as long as they're getting money. So, these types of reasons, I think most of the population can agree with. So I think that's one important part. And you're seeing that around Europe. Pretty much most countries, if not all countries, are using those same arguments. And that's different from the U.S. The U.S. didn't really use those arguments. Their arguments were more like, well, people are going to use it anyway, so why not? That way we can tax it. We need money. Those were the kind of the arguments in the U.S., much different than here in Europe, where it's about safety and getting rid of the black market. So I think that's one big thing. Another important point, though, is we had the legalization in Germany. The world did not end. Children did not start using cannabis in school and all these other things that people were saying are going to happen. People didn't start dying in the streets or crashing their cars. All these other fear mongering tactics didn't come true. It hasn't been very long, but still, we haven't seen any negative consequences really from it. And if we if we take a look at data from other countries like Canada and the U.S., all those things aren't going to come true anyway. But I think those are some of those important points that Germany has been doing a good job of it, relatively speaking, and it's working to a large degree.
Yeah, and even in war-torn Ukraine, there's significant progress. I think mostly on the medical side. Is that right?
Yeah, in Ukraine, so they passed a medical cannabis rules or law in 2024, and they just had the first cannabis products registered earlier this month. Ukraine does have, like many countries, when they first passed these laws, there are some definite issues with the law. One issue in the Ukraine is that PTSD was left out as one of the conditions that it could be prescribed for, despite that being one of the main talking points was the PTSD and other issues coming from the war. That those would be a good reason to have medical cannabis. And then it got left out from the initial law, but it is a good first step. They also left out flower products, which is the way majority of cannabis is used, even in the medical side. Even though I personally, as a physician, don't think flower is necessarily the best medical way, but it's better than nothing for sure. And if it's helping people, then that's the important part. And having that restriction severely limits also the access people have because other products are not as easy to access as flour.
Yeah, and there must be a big opportunity in Ukraine post-war for agriculture for the growers and cultivation generally.
I would think so. I mean, Ukraine has been one of the biggest agricultural countries in the world for many decades, and has an extremely strong agricultural sector. So I would expect that they will, after the war, be able to have a very strong agriculture or cultivation sector. I'm not sure if the current laws really address that or not. I would have to do some research and see about that. But I'm assuming that they are eyeing that as a potential new industry, since they're going to need obviously a lot of help with their economy once the mess over there, hopefully this year, is done. But I would expect that yeah, that's going to be a huge opportunity there.
Yeah, and each country sort of does things in its own way. I think looking at the Czech Republic, they're taking kind of small practical steps to open up the markets, which is it looks very promising because small practical steps are sustainable. They haven't done anything dramatic, but it looks like they're just gently moving in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like I mentioned earlier, they're kind of mirroring, excuse me, a little bit what Germany's doing. I don't think on purpose. I don't think they're trying to copy Germany or anything like that. I think it's like you said. These are reasonable steps, kind of like Germany did the legalization of home growing and personal possession. That's what Czech Republic has done now. Also, you can have 3 plants at home, 25 grams on your person, 50 grams in your house, which is exactly what Germany did. And those are reasonable first steps. I think those numbers could and should be a little bit higher, actually, in my own opinion. But those are very reasonable first steps. Now, the Czech Republic has also said they're actually going to have regulated sales of low THC cannabis, so up to 1%, starting middle of this year, which is a step beyond what Germany has done. And I think is kind of another small step, like you mentioned, towards then having regulated sales of high THC cannabis. That's kind of the way and I think other people are viewing that as another small step to try and test it out, get the systems in place, see how things work, see how it affects people, consumers, and the black market, and another step in that general direction. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and in Spain, I think it's fascinating that the market there is going to change or is changing because of royal decree. People listening to this outside of Europe might be surprised that a royal decree makes a change to a market, but it does seem like a bright light in terms of opening the market up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, it's for years, Spain as a whole, the government has been very anti-cannabis, has had a lot of um, disagreements with Barcelona about their cannabis clubs, where Barcelona was trying to protect the cannabis clubs, and the federal government's coming in and trying to shut them down, and it's been an ongoing point of contention, along with others, of course, but that's been one of them. And so I think it was a bit of a surprise to see something happening on the federal level there in a positive direction. Um, the Like other countries, there are some issues or shortcomings of their law or this royal decree. Um, you're not going to have flour, just like in Ukraine, no flour. Very limited conditions can be prescribed for. It's only from specialist doctors. So still going to be very, very difficult for many people as a whole to access medical cannabis there. But once again, it's moving in the right direction. It's a first step. It's a way for the government to test the waters and take small steps and see how things work. And then, assuming that it will go like in most places, they can start to expand the list of conditions. Maybe they add flour later, whatever those next steps are. But it's once again, heading in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, and is there an emerging kind of EU position on these markets, or is some of the countries we talked about are not in the EU, but the EU is a major governing power on the continent. Is the EU just kind of standing back and letting people get on with it, and it will probably stay out of the main conversation if things are roughly in control?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. It'd be nice to think so, but if you look at, Germany had big plans to do full regulated market for recreational cannabis, and the EU is the one who said no. There was EU and UN both have laws or regulations, rules, whatever they are called, which say you can't have trans or you can't have sale of or transport of cannabis across international borders for recreational purposes, only for medical and research purposes. And that's where the big issue came for Germany wanting to have recreational sales, because Germany can't grow enough to supply the home market. So the EU is the one who kind of put the brakes on Germany's ambitious plans. And Czech Republic was looking at the same thing, and they said, "Oh, well, if Germany can't do it, we probably shouldn't try either." The EU has not taken a back seat. The UN has been pretty quiet, and I think the UN has to be, because Canada legalized, Uruguay, other countries have legalized and are exporting, and the UN hasn't done anything. So it'd be kind of pointless for the UN to now say, Germany, you can't do it, because all Germany has to do is point at Canada and say, they've been doing it for years. What's your point? But the EU is not doing that. But what you have seen is, that there have been several meetings of multiple EU countries, such as, I don't remember which all countries were involved, but I know Germany and the Czech Republic were involved. Not sure, but I feel like Malta and
Portugal?
maybe Portugal. Don't remember who else, but 4 or 5 countries who are in the EU did get together, have gotten together several times. There's a kind of a working group of some sort, apparently, where they're discussing this and trying to move it forward. So I think you will see movement in the EU, but probably not this year. I think the EU moves slower than the federal governments,
Yeah.
and you've got all these governments who need to agree. I don't know what the threshold is, but out of the 30-something EU countries, you're probably going to have 75% or something agree to change those rules, and you're always going to have holdouts like Hungary and countries that just like to cause trouble no matter what, or use them as bargaining chips, who are going to cause issues. Or I can't imagine France agreeing to changing the rules right now when they are only allowing limited medical sales, and they're kicking and screaming about that. So I think the EU is still a ways away, but once again, it's heading in a positive direction, and there are discussions happening. I think it's just going to be slow.
Yeah, I think the EU will require unanimous support for changes at that level. But basically, the industry is growing. So, on a very practical note, what do you see from your position, Andy? I mean, you're talking to the movers and shakers, and then the startups, the scale ups. What do you see as the major job opportunities for people coming from other industries into the cannabis industry?
Yeah, I mean, sales is really the number one area where you see across the board companies hiring, and it makes sense. If you're not selling your product, then what's your point of being in business, more or less? So there's always sales opportunities. Of course, companies are looking for people with cannabis experience, and there are not enough people with cannabis experience to fill all the openings. So for people in our on our side who are trying to recruit for these positions, that kind of puts us in an awkward position sometimes because there aren't enough candidates with the exact experience. Um, but a good sales background, and then if people can show that they have some type of knowledge about the industry, I think is very important. Networking can also be very important. You know, using things like LinkedIn, which has all kinds of different cannabis related groups where people can join and start talking to people, start making connections, can be very important. Many times people can then, through those connections, already find jobs on their own. But if nothing else, if someone comes to me and I have their resume and I present them to a company, and someone who happens to be one of the people who is interviewing says, "Oh, I know this person. I've talked to him on LinkedIn," or they look him up on LinkedIn, which many times companies do look people up on LinkedIn or other social media. They see, oh, he's involved in all these cannabis groups, and you can see, oh, he's been involved in these discussions, and he seems to know what he's talking about. That can be very important. Um,
And,
yeah, go ahead.
well, just on that note, talking about sales particularly, are is there the majority? Does the majority of opportunities exist in B2B or B2C?
In Europe, it's really more B2B because of the way kind of the rules are in most countries, if not in all of them. You're especially in Germany, you're not allowed to. Cannabis company cannot talk to patients, for instance, directly. And 99.9% of the market in Germany is medical cannabis. So there are severe restrictions on talking, on a company talking or advertising in any fashion to a patient. So you have to be very careful, and you can get in trouble for doing things which you don't even realize you could be interpreted as you talking to the patients. So it's really about, for instance, in Germany, the salesperson would be going out and talking to the doctors or the pharmacies or the distributors. So it's pretty much B2B. Same in UK, which is probably the second biggest market in Europe. You're also, the salespeople are also talking to doctors, clinics, and so on. So it's pretty much all B2B currently. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a transferable skill for salespeople from another marketplace, and I think also there's a shortage of pharmacists in cannabis in Europe right now.
Yeah, absolutely. As the as the sales go up, most of the countries require that everything gets sold through a pharmacy. The only place currently, I think, that has dispensary type system is in Switzerland, which are the recreational pilot projects. But still, that's a very small amount of the sales there. The majority there is also medical sales, and the medical sales go through pharmacies. So as the growth, as you've seen tremendous growth over the last 2 years, the pharmacies can't keep up. There's a lot of online pharmacies, which obviously they are a little bit better positioned to scale up. But a lot of people like to go to their local pharmacy, which is great. Support the local business. But those pharmacies now, a lot of them are overwhelmed and just can't keep up with the demand. So we've filled some pharmacy positions before, but it was difficult finding candidates. And also, a lot of pharmacists traditionally are more conservative, at least in Germany, and don't necessarily. Some of them don't necessarily agree with medical cannabis, which makes it also more difficult than to find candidates.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I know that the job board, the EU Canada Jobs Board, is getting busier and busier. So I'll ask you this question, kind of two dimensions. What would a good year look like for EU Canada jobs and also for the market?
I mean, I think for the market, you have a new government coming in soon in Germany. It's not clear who's going to win, but the conservatives are expected to win, and they have said that they want to reverse a lot of the cannabis laws. That's most likely not going to happen. All the other major parties in Germany have come out and said that they're in support of cannabis laws. And now, recently, just in the last week or so, one of the CDU politicians actually came out and also said that they are not going to put medical cannabis back in the narcotics list, and they're in support of medical cannabis. So it sounds like medical cannabis will be relatively safe in Germany. The recreational side might get slowed down, but one of the big drivers of growth in Germany and in other countries has been the online clinics, where people can have an online appointment and for a low cost get a prescription and then get their medical cannabis. And there's a fear that a lot of this is being abused by recreational users, and so that's an area that could get kind of knocked down and slow down the growth. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But so what would a good year for Germany and Europe look like? I would say that the medical cannabis is not restricted in any fashion in Germany or in other countries, including these online appointments not being restricted. That would be great. Seeing recreational pilot projects move forward in Germany. 27 municipalities are looking at doing that. Allowing that to move forward in a controlled manner, like the plan is, and seeing progress in other countries for mainly on the medical side. I don't think it's reasonable to expect a recreational or hope for a recreational market in countries where the medical market isn't really established. So I think some important countries for that would be Spain, France, and Portugal, really seeing their medical markets being allowed to flourish and have greater patient access, because all three of those countries have a lot of patients who are requesting access to medical cannabis and they just can't get it. So really expanding that medical market to allow people to access what they're looking for. That, of course, would lead to more jobs, which would lead to an increase of work for us. So that would make us happy. It's always a double-edged sword. What we want to do is really try and leverage technology so that as our workload increases, we are not necessarily increasing the amount of hours we have to put in. As a startup, we all put in too many hours already, 6-7 days a week kind of stuff. And so we don't want to increase that, or in many cases we can't even. So for us, it'd be leveraging our technology to allow us to take on the increased demand without working ourselves to death.
Yeah, well, I think there's a good chance that's going to happen. It's nice to get through a podcast without mentioning what's going on in the US. But I think we've got a lot going on in Europe, whatever happens.
Yeah, and I'll say one thing about that. I mean, it's so unpredictable with the new administration that predictions for that, I think, are almost pointless, because it's at the whim of a unpredictable person. So who knows what's going to happen there? And
Yeah.
it can change from one day to the next and flip flop back and forth. So
But what is predictable, I think, is what we were discussing earlier, which is that what people basically want is probably how the markets pan out. So on that basis, I think we're in a good place.
yeah. And in the U.S., the states, are the ones who've pushed all the legalization despite threats from the government for the last 20 years, 20, 30 years. The federal government there has threatened states and individuals and doctors, and it continued to move forward. And that is the way it will continue, whether federal legalization happens there or not. The states will stand up for their own rights and for the rights of their citizens and their patients and consumers. So, and that's like what we discussed here. Here also, people, consumers, patients are the ones who, in the end, slowly but surely get their way.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Well, Andy, have a good year, and let's catch up during the year and see how it's going.
Sounds great. You too, Stefan. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you everyone else for joining us. Hope you enjoyed our conversations with Stefan today. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn for pretty much daily updates, interviews, industry news, and also job opportunities. We'll also post a couple of jobs at the end of this podcast that we're trying to fill. So until next time, hope you have a great day. Stay informed, stay connected, and keep exploring the world of cannabis.